Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. Everything here is good. Yeah, it's good. Um, if you're a software developer, or maybe any kind of creative, or maybe not creative, maybe so, but if you build things, whether it's software or it's literally building something, chances are, at some point in your process, you have either radically overestimated or underestimated the difficulty of a situation. And boy, let me tell you, I have been working on a feature for Component Studio now for 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks. Technically, I didn't work on it much at all last week because day job stuff, I just didn't have any brain power left over. But I'm back on it, and I'm wrapping it up, I think, finally. And it's filling up this journal. Like, there's pages and pages and pages of notes in this book because it's a much more complex problem than I initially thought. And that is a find and replace tool. Find and replace seems like it's so ubiquitous in all the things that we use in the world that it just seems like something that it's like a solved issue. You just do this. And it kind of is. Most languages have built-in string replace functions where you can just take a string and pass a thing. But the thing is, and maybe the fallacy that you might find yourself in is when somebody says, I need you to implement a find and replace on this table, you go, okay, and I can just use string replace. And then you do that, and then you realize, oh, that's not how find and replace works. That's not what the user expects. And so the expectation, the initial thought is, I'll just use string replace, and I can just search through the table and find instances and replace them. Cool, but what if the user only wants to replace 4 of the 5? What if the user entered something wrong and needs to back up? There's a whole bunch of different situations that could arise from this. And it's pretty wild, right? It's a bit of a mess. One of my strengths has always been, and this might also be a weakness. I'll admit it causes problems probably more than it solves problem. Is that I'm always able to plan for the what if, or I always see the what if in advance, and so it often gets me into trouble where I will start solving a problem based on the what if instead of let's get something working and then going forward. And it ends up meaning that a lot of times I just don't proceed because I can't see how to solve, whatever it is in my head. And there are definitely times when whatever it is in my head is not, maybe not a real world problem. It probably is a real world problem, but it might not be something, it might be something that was easily solved once the rest was in place. In this particular case, so find and replace. I have a setup, simple little thing. First of all, figuring out how to find based on what you typed in with any case, what you typed in case sensitive, what you typed in exactly, or what you typed in matching only a whole word. I had to write a whole thing around that, and that was complex enough. That was some regex and doing some okay, well, I think I got this. Replacing all of that, that's pretty easy because you can just use those language constructs, those replace things. But then doing the typical find and replace, if you've used any find and replace feature, pops up and you have some options. Replace all, cool, hit that button, it just does it. Hit replace, it's going to replace the first instance, and then it's going to jump to the next one and hit replace there, and it's going to keep doing that. Figuring all that part out has been just a nightmare. That skip feature, the ability to not replace something, has been wild in my head. I'm finally at a place where I've got it, I think. But I guess the point of all this is, I have often found that my ability to foresee problems is a good thing, but my fallacy is allowing those problems to become roadblocks instead of trying. All of this is to say that for 3 weeks now, in 4 different versions of this find and replace tool, I started to work on what I should have started on in the first place. And I knew I should have started on the first place, but I chose not to because that answer wouldn't take into account that skip button. And I wanted to find the solution that fixes that skip button while doing the rest. Or before doing, before starting. But what I have discovered is, by ignoring the skip button and figuring out how to do a find and replace, you click the button and I start replacing stuff. I found out that doing the skip is not that difficult. It actually is. It's just one line of code gets switched. That's it. Like, it's real simple. It's actually pretty easy. But I was letting it just halt all progress because, I just couldn't figure out how to do it. Like, well, how am I going to take that into account? Because if you search for something and then you skip it and then you research, you're going to find that thing that you just skipped again. Do you store that skip somewhere? Do you, there's a whole bunch of different ways of approaching it. I have a solution that will work for what we need, and I'm working on finishing it. I'm really darn close to finishing it, but and it's been a nightmare. Not a nightmare in a bad way. It's been a nightmare in a very good way. It's something that I would challenge anybody to take on. Like, write a find and replace function that does all the stuff. That does skipping, that does code highlighting. So syntax highlighting, I want to be able to show the user, here's what you have, here's what I'm replacing, and highlight those things. All that stuff. Figure out how to do all of that. That's a pretty complex challenge, and it's been a really rewarding experience. I'm going to be happy to have it done, though. So soon, if you're using Component Studio, there will be a find and replace function in your dataset editor. It's kicking my butt, and I'm positive it could be done in a better way. I don't see it. So that's where we're at. Had to get that off my chest. It's just a lesson that I need to learn about literally everything. Probably it's better to just start and worry about that, let future you worry about that sideline problem instead of letting that sideline problem hold up the rest of the progress, because maybe you have to rewrite everything. Maybe you have to start over because that problem does become unsolvable and you have to start from a different approach. But you've probably learned a whole lot in that process that will make the next time easier. And most of the time you will find that roadblock isn't really a roadblock once you've gotten through the rest. I think that's the lesson I'm trying to teach myself. What do you think? Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends, wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is preternatural. It's an adjective meaning both supernatural and preternatural, describe things that are out of the norm. But supernatural implies forces beyond understanding, while preternatural simply means abnormal or unnatural. I rested my knee against the cabinet for leverage and pulled hard, calling on preternatural strength. Mario Acevedo, an American fantasy author. Preternatural. Preternatural. When does something that is supernatural, when can it become preternatural once we understand the mechanisms that created it?